Hello, everybody, for this month's Fearless Fridays. I'm here with Corrie Jones. So, Corrie, why don't we dive straight into it and you tell us what you were doing before and what you're doing today?
Let's do it. So, before I started my business, I was working in higher education. I used to work at a university managing their social media channels. I was in the team looking after social media. It was very much still focused on kind of print marketing and old school methods of marketing. Quite a slow moving place to be. So, I made the leap to start a social media agency called Untapped Digital, which is what I spend my time doing now.
Amazing. Sounds very straightforward. So, what was it that led you to make the change and start your own agency?
Yeah, so I mean, definitely not as straightforward as it sounds, I'm sure. I wasn't 100% happy working in a 9 to 5 environment. It was quite restrictive in terms of being able to work from home, and kind of the development and everything I was getting in that role wasn't where I wanted it to be. And increasingly, I just felt like there's much more out there that I could be doing. And I think I kind of naively went into starting a business because I knew I could manage social media accounts because that's what I've been doing in my day-to-day role. I didn't think about anything else that went into running a business, really. I'd never done anything business-like before, or studied business, or done anything kind of entrepreneurial. And so I jumped in kind of blindly, thinking, I'd figure it out as I went, which I did, but definitely not as straightforward, I think, as it can sometimes seem. There's a lot that goes into it always.
Sometimes it can good to be naive, right? Because if we knew everything that it took, we probably wouldn't take the leap in the first place. So it's good to be prepared, but sometimes a little bit of lack of knowledge, a little bit of ignorance might help.
Yeah, completely. And I said that to people before, actually, that I think if I knew everything then now, and if I had a real accurate idea of how hard it was going to be, I probably would have been less likely to jump in and do it. So I think it was good to be naive in a way. It makes it a very steep learning curve, but I guess that it really is the only way to learn things like that.
Okay, we'll explore a bit more about that in a moment. But what was the steep learning curve? What were the biggest challenges, would you say, in terms of both kind of, I guess, leaving, making the decision, and then getting the business up and running?
Yeah, I mean, firstly, leaving, it was tricky to set a real deadline for when I wanted that to happen, because it's not like where you're going from one job to another, and you've got a month's notice period, and it's more kind of traditional and clear of how that will work. I think when you're moving from a 9 to 5 to setting up a business, there's so many more unknowns, and it's much, or I at least found it much harder to set a very clear timeline for that. So what I actually did to kind of force myself to quit was I booked a trip to go to a tech conference that I didn't have the annual leave allowance for. So I knew that I at least needed to give my notice a month before that conference was coming up. Otherwise, it would just roll around. If I hadn't, got the courage to give my notice by that point, I just wouldn't be able to go to the conference. But definitely that conversation with my manager, he was like, "Oh, that's very brave," and it was kind of a subtext of maybe like a little bit, have you kind of thought this through? So that was tricky, but mainly, the trickiest thing I would say was once I started. I remember that first week of running a business, I kind of sat down on the Monday at 9 a.m. and I was like, so what do I do now? Because you're just completely figuring out what that looks like for you, and everything that you need to be doing and focusing on, and how to get clients, how to work with those clients, how to service those clients, how to deal with conflicts with those clients. Absolutely everything was, you're just learning it for the first time. So the steep learning curve came in those moments and those days where I didn't know exactly what to be working on, and had to completely think of that from scratch, and then make it work and learn very quickly from where it wasn't working to kind of know what to do next time differently.
How long did it take you, would you say, from sort of sitting down that first Monday morning going, okay, I have a business, to feeling really, I guess you never get completely comfortable, but at least, getting into a routine and having that consistent income?
Yeah, I always feel like every day that I wake up and run the business, I always feel like is the first day of doing it, in the sense that I feel like I learn so much every day that I'm like, how was I managing yesterday when I didn't know this piece of information that I do know today? Which is quite nice in the sense, because you feel like you're always learning and developing. In terms of a consistent income, so I started the business in October 2016, and I got a client in March of 2007. something that got me back up to the point of a monthly income that I was at previously in my job. But I'd always set that as a goal for myself, like, I just want to replace my income from before. But then I kind of realized that was thinking quite small, and actually with a business you can go far above and beyond that. So that was how long it took to kind of get to the same point as being in my job. But now that to far exceed and surpass that financially.
Amazing. It's quite arbitrary, isn't it, trying to match your salary? It could be a really high salary, in which case maybe you don't need that much, or it could be a lowish, pretty arbitrary salary that someone set for you. But it's interesting because it sounds like it's the other side of the coin in each case. It's the autonomy that we dream of, but that does mean that you then have to get up and direct yourself. There's no boss telling you what to focus on, and there's no sort of blueprint to follow. There's no structure at all. There's a learning curve, which is really exciting, but it also means that you're constantly sort of a little bit flying free and not quite sure what's going on.
Yeah, completely. I mean, I definitely went from one extreme to the other in that I left my previous job because there wasn't the autonomy I was looking for, there wasn't the development I was looking for. And now what I'm doing, there's so much autonomy and so much development that almost then becomes the scary thing within itself, that you go from one end to the other. But I'm definitely more comfortable now at this end of things, where you are, figuring out for yourself what that looks like. And the possibilities are kind of limitless in the sense of what you can do, which I think to some is a bit scary and overwhelming, and definitely a lot of days it can feel that way. But I find it much more empowering than being in a job that you're not enjoying, where your possibilities are a bit more limited.
100%. And I guess it's almost 3 years now since that first regular client. Are there any new challenges that have reared their ugly heads now that you're a bit more into sort of further along in the business?
Yeah, I mean, now that there's a team involved, obviously, managing people becomes a whole kind of thing unto itself. The bigger that, you get, and the more kind of we develop as a company, the bigger kind of client projects that we're taking on. And I think the more that you've got going on at any one time almost becomes the issue. And it's ironic because, 2-3 years ago, I'd have a couple of clients and I'd be like, oh, I want more. And, I need more to be going on here. And now it's almost like, oh, there's too much. Your to-do list just gets so long and feels kind of immeasurable as to how much you could get done. But I think my perspective on the challenges is much more different now to what it used to be. I used to, when I first started the business, I was such a perfectionist. And I've had a lot of founders say this actually, that they thought, they wanted everything to be a certain way. And they felt like, oh, I can't do this yet because I haven't finished my website, or I can't contact that client because I haven't perfected, how my personal brand looks, or all these different kind of excuses they are really at the end of the day that we make for ourselves, and why we can't get further ahead. But actually, running a business has been the biggest lesson in that perfect just completely does not exist. There's nothing in the world that could be perfect. You could spend months and months and months doing something, and it still wouldn't be perfect to everyone. And everything that's happening now at the moment with coronavirus is a great example of, we've had client projects that we've been working with people, set to launch or release this week or in the next few weeks, and then you have to scrap things and change plans and everything because it's not the right time to release them. So I think you just learn very quickly that mistakes are there to be made, and mistakes actually make you better at what you're doing, because you learn more from mistakes than you do when things are going well, because that feedback is exactly what you need.
That's very true. If it goes too well too soon, then you're quite lucky, and then you get further along and then you crash and burn. It's probably better to sort of learn organically along the way. Have you read the book The Company of One? Yeah. I just read it last month. It talks about the fact that you shouldn't just set the minimum income that you want, but actually a maximum too. As you said, you might be growing too big, and actually that's not part of your vision for how you want your business and life to be.
Oh, wow, that's interesting. No, I haven't read it, but it sounds similar to a book that I read recently by the founders of Basecamp called It Doesn't Have to Be Crazy at Work. And they've done something similar in that they're going up against all these big Silicon Valley companies. And they said, actually, we don't want to do things that way. We don't want to grow that quickly. We want to, protect our team, protect everyone's well-being and mental health and everything like that. And they've put some really interesting policies in place that enable them to grow at that steady pace. They don't actually have any plans for revenue goals or anything like that, but I have to check out that book too. That sounds interesting.
Basecamp was one of the examples he put forward, actually, so that's interesting. And in terms of the team, was that an organic thing that just happened, or was that a very intentional choice that you really wanted to have a company with a team, office, and all these things from the beginning?
And I work on a day rate, and I'm quite small, and I'd seen digital nomads and people working in Bali and all of this, and I thought I could get on board with that. But then kind of quickly I realized that it was a lot of work I wanted to be at a certain level, which meant it couldn't just be me managing things. And again, with that kind of perfectionist tendency that I had at the start, it was quite difficult the first time that I was outsourcing a task, and I was outsourcing something that used to be something that I worked on. I think it's different maybe if you're outsourcing for a skill set that you don't have, but when you're outsourcing for a skill set that where you do have, and that was a task that you were doing for clients before, and then you're asking someone else to do it, it was definitely a challenge in how you delegate that and manage that person. But it started, in terms of growing the team, it started because it got to the stage where I was like, I cannot do everything in a day here, and I'm limiting where the business could get to by acting like I can get all of that done. It needs to be other people working on it as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, and where have you got the support along the way? Has it just been learning by doing and trial and error and making lots of mistakes and finding your way around it? Or what have you been doing to get the support you need at the different stages of your business?
Definitely learning by doing is a massive, massive part of how we do things. Like I said, I've never studied a business course. I've never kind of done anything particularly formally in terms of learning how to run a business. So it has just been seeking advice from the right people at the right time for the stage of business that I'm at. And sometimes I think it can be difficult to find those right people who are good to give you that advice at that time. So that can be tricky. But when you do find someone who, either perhaps runs a similar business or has a business in a similar industry or a similar stage to you, it can be really invaluable to get their viewpoint and words of wisdom on what to do at that stage. I also read a lot, and actually my 2020 New Year's resolution was to read more, but I read a lot of business books or articles or watch videos, and kind of where I feel like my knowledge or skill set is lacking in a certain area, I will seek out different resources specifically on that topic rather than just kind of on all business topics, because I think that can be quite overwhelming. It's good to think to yourself specifically, what's the issue that I'm having today or this week at this moment in time, and who's the best person to learn from to get over that issue.
I think that's a really good piece of advice. I think no one's ever said that, but I think it's such a key one because it's so easy to join a membership group with all these courses and to read all the books and to follow all the emails. I did this way at the beginning 5-6 years ago, and actually you sort of read it, you read the stuff, you watch it, and then you just feel overwhelmed. Whereas actually if you go, hang on a second, at the moment, the focus is to reach people or to build a brand or whatever it is, and then you can speak to the right people and so on. So that sounds like a much more focused, sensible way to do it.
Yeah, completely. I think there's so much information out there now on how to do these things. And if you let the information come to you, it's sometimes just not the right time for when you need that information. I always find that I check my emails first thing in the morning, which potentially is a habit to get out of anyway. But then you might read an email from a brand that says, 10 ways to improve your SEO. And then instantly I'm like, oh gosh, we're not doing much with SEO. Like, should I look into SEO more? And then you're reading this blog they've put together, like, oh, wow, we're not doing any of this. And, it doesn't mean that it's not good information to learn, but actually, was it top of your priority list for that day? No, not at all. Is it going to move the needle the most? And really, every day, I think the way that I find to grow quickest is to think, what will actually move the needle today? And not just do this kind of busy work that makes you feel like you're making progress, but actually, what's the task you need to be doing that will mean that tomorrow you're slightly closer to where you want to be in business. And sometimes it is this busy work with thinking of things like SEO or perfecting the website and everything like that, that definitely in running an agency, the things that we do to move the needle are actually emailing potential clients or getting on the phone to people and trying to book in new contracts. It's not necessarily the work that people want to do, because the SEO and the website and everything is more kind of the pretty keep busy work, but that's what you actually need to do to make progress that day.
It's the pretty work, it's the comfortable work, because you do it behind the scenes. And as you say, it is tempting because some guru has said you've got to do these things and we're not doing any of these things and so on. But actually, the uncomfortable work of picking up the phone, talking to someone the old school way is actually more effective. Um,
Yeah, completely. And that is what most of my day to day is now, is that sales and business
mm,
development side of the business, which 3 years ago, if you'd said, oh, sales is such a massive part of your business, I would have said, no, it's not. I'm a social media consultant. I don't do sales. I really, really hated it. But now I've come to accept that that is, if you're running an agency and you are in that business development
mm,
role, sales is what you do really. And a lot of people don't like, picking up the phone to someone they've never
mm.
spoken to before and explaining a service to them and pitching them that service and all of that side of things that goes into it. But actually that will definitely, I guarantee, be much more effective if you're an agency owner than, reading a blog post about SEO and convincing yourself that's like the strategy to have for that day.
And a little bit off topic, but since you're talking about this, I'm curious, what do you do then? Are you cold calling? Have you done research? Have you done lots of work on understanding exactly the type of companies that you want to be working with?
We don't do that much cold calling. We do emailing and LinkedIn messaging. And then offline, we do quite a lot of either speaking at events where it's maybe a co-working space that's hosting them, and we'll come along and speak to that audience about how to use social media for their business, or where we're not speaking at the event. I'm just kind of in the audience where I think it's an audience who would potentially be a good fit for us to work with as an agency, and I'll meet people and interact with them in person there. And I think that mixture of having that online activity and that offline activity works really well for us. We're still quite lucky that we get a lot of referrals through from past clients or old colleagues or people that just kind of know of us and have worked with us and had a great experience, and so they want to recommend other people, which is always a great way to bring new clients in, because you've immediately got that relationship is slightly more built up than if it's just someone that you're messaging on LinkedIn or cold emailing out of the blue.
Mm-mm. Okay, and you talked about the autonomy and the challenge that was missing from your past work. What are the best things about your work and life now? Do you have all the things you were dreaming of? Are there unexpected sides that are even better than you thought? What's it like now? What are the best parts of what you're doing?
Well, there's so many unexpected sides. Like I said, because I kind of so naively started a business, I don't ever recall actually sitting down to think about what it would be like running a business and kind of the stress or bad sides of that. But the good things are, I think, I'm just so much more excited to work on what I work on every day. There's such a pride you get from building something ground up and looking at everything that happens with it and thinking, there was a stage where this was just an idea in my head and now it's actually happening. But I think more so the most exciting thing to me is just the possibilities of where it could go, and knowing that that is completely on your shoulders, and what you put into it is what you get back from it. Because with previous roles and jobs I've had, I never felt like what I put into it was what I got back out. You could be sat in the office working until 10 p.m. trying to get something done in a 9 to 5 environment, and you might get kind of a well done or something like that, but you didn't, or the roles I was in, you didn't get a financial reward for that. You didn't get a promotion or anything kind of extra. So I think now at least I know that the time and the effort you put in, you are building something that will kind of last and will provide. And I think that's the really exciting thing, and the pace at which it moves as well, that you can think of an idea and then implement it in the business, and that can have real impact. I think is fun to play around with for sure.
Mm-hmm. And I know you've already given us a few tidbits of tips, but what key advice would you give someone who's at the stage, maybe of feeling they're looking for more autonomy, maybe particularly now in quite a difficult climate? What would you say in terms of how would you go into the business naively as you did, or would you give some more advice and maybe you should sit down and think these things through a bit more?
Yeah, I mean, I think hindsight's a wonderful thing. Now, I would definitely start things out differently. I think as a solo founder, I'm always really intrigued as to what it would be like to have had a co-founder, because then you've always, I think, potentially you might move a bit more quickly than I did, because obviously you've got double the resource immediately of someone to work on it, but you've also got someone to bounce ideas off with, and you've got different complementary skill sets that you can use to grow that. We also never sought funding. It was just completely self-funded from kind of savings that I'd had from a previous job. And with the type of business it was, I had I had my laptop. That was all we really needed at the start to get things going. So it wasn't particularly, there was no kind of investment that I needed to make really. So from the start, it was just as clients started paying invoices, that was the money that was in the business bank account. But were I to do things again, I don't know whether I would, go and seek investment so that I could get staff from the start and have an office and go after kind of bigger client contracts from the start rather than grow it over the 3 years. So I think I would advise, if someone is thinking of starting a business or wants a bit more autonomy, do have a look at the numbers, do look into whether it is the right time to start for you. But also I think don't kind of talk yourself out of it before you've given it a go. I think because if you think about it too much, like you said, sometimes naivety is a good thing because it means that at least you do jump in and get started. If you're too kind of logical and well researched, I'd say there's an argument for it starting to look a bit impossible on paper. And sometimes it's not how it stacks up on paper, which is what will make it work. It's the grit and the determination and the hard work that you're going to bring to it is actually what will make it work. So I think keep that spark alive, but perhaps look into it a tad more than I did, because I was just like, yeah, running a business, cool, and jumped straight in.
I love that. But as you said at the beginning as well, this perfectionism that we have, it's just not possible to control every element. So even if you have the most beautiful business plan, and I'm all for visions and strategies and business plans, but that's going to probably evolve in many different ways when you actually get out there and see what happens and these unexpected things that come along. So I think great to do some thinking and look at the numbers, as you said, but there is a point at which you just have to start trying and talking to people, picking up that phone as you had to do, and seeing what happens in the real world.
Yeah, exactly. Because, time is the most valuable resource that we've got, and you don't want to waste it. And so you could spend, years and years and years on this amazing business idea or writing the most perfect business plan. And actually, there'll be some elements of it that was, even I'm like, oh, we could tweak this, we could tweak this. You learn so much from actually speaking to your clients and working with them. And you can't write a business plan that works without having spoken to the audience that you're going to be, serving or selling to in that business. So the best thing to do is learn by doing, and, make those mistakes so that you can say, yeah, that was not the best way of doing it. Let's try it again this way. But at least you're doing it from learned experience rather than just being sat with a bit of paper thinking about, the best way to do it.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. Well, congratulations on coming so far. I'm really happy that you've been able to grow the business so much, and excited to see what happens in the future. Where can we find you? Where can we find out more about your agency? On social? Where's your website? Where can we find you?
Yeah, sure. So our website is www.untappeddigital.co, and on social you can find us everywhere by searching Untapped Digital, and we will pop up.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for your time, and I look forward to seeing how the business evolves in the coming years.
Amazing. Thank you. Thanks so much for having me. It was great to chat with you.